It started as a night meant to define luxury itself, a celebration of power, fame, and reinvention. But within an hour, it would descend into one of the most jaw-dropping celebrity clashes Hollywood has ever seen. Imagine this: flashing cameras, diamond chandeliers reflecting across marble floors, and in the midst of it all, the matriarch of modern fame herself, Kris Jenner, staring in disbelief as two unexpected guests stepped through her gates like they owned the place. And no, it wasn't another A-list surprise performance. It was Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The crowd gasped. The music faltered. The photographers froze, unsure whether to shoot or hide, because everyone knew something was off. Something about their arrival felt unplanned, unscripted, and entirely unwelcome. You have to wonder, what happens when the Queen of Hollywood control meets the ex-royal rebels who thrive on chaos? What happens when the most powerful woman in entertainment throws a party where every second is choreographed, and two people crash it who refuse to play by anyone's rules but their own? And what if I told you this wasn't just another awkward Hollywood moment, but a turning point, one that exposed the fragile balance between power, image, and desperation? Tonight, we're going inside Kris Jenner's 70th birthday bash, the night the Kardashians couldn't control, the night police were called, the night the royal outsiders faced the harshest lesson Hollywood has to offer. You can't outshine the one who built the spotlight. But before we get to that explosive moment, before sirens, shouting, and Kris Jenner's icy stare, you need to understand how the stage was set for disaster. Picture this: Beverly Hills at dusk. The Jenner estate glowing like a golden fortress on the hill. A line of black SUVs stretching around the block, filled with the biggest names on earth: Oprah, Jeff Bezos, Kim Kardashian, and her new billionaire partner, Elton John, rumored to be performing a private set. Every corner of Kris's garden transformed into a floral masterpiece worth $500,000. The cake taller than most guests. The guest list shorter than a royal apology. And that's what makes what happened next so strange. Because Meghan and Harry weren't on that list. They knew it. Kris knew it. Everyone knew it. Yet somehow, they arrived anyway. Now let's pause there. Why would two of the most talked about people in the world show up to a party they weren't invited to? Was it a misunderstanding? A miscommunication? Or was it something else? A desperate move to stay relevant in a world that had moved on from royal drama to billionaire brand wars? Because ever since Meghan and Harry left the royal family, they've been chasing a new kind of crown, one made of followers, fame, and validation. And where better to find that than in the Kardashian universe? But Kris Jenner is not Buckingham Palace. She doesn't bow to titles. She creates them. She doesn't deal in protocol. She deals in profit. And what Harry and Meghan would learn that night is that in Hollywood, power is not inherited. It's built, managed, and fiercely protected. Guests remember it vividly. It was around 8:30 p.m. when the Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the private gate. The guards checked the guest list twice, confused. One leaned into his radio and whispered, "Their names aren't on here." Another tried to call the event coordinator. But before he could, Meghan rolled down the window, smiled with that practiced Hollywood confidence, and said the words that would ignite a scandal. "Tell Kris we're here." The guard hesitated. Inside the car, Harry adjusted his collar, visibly uneasy. But Meghan remained poised, phone in hand, as if every second was another headline waiting to happen. Behind them, paparazzi lenses glinted in the dark. The guard, not wanting to create a scene, finally opened the gate. And that, right there, was the moment the night began to spiral. Inside, the music swelled again as Kris made her grand entrance, surrounded by her family. Cameras flashed. Champagne flowed. But somewhere near the edge of the crowd, a quiet buzz started spreading, an uneasy whisper from one group to another. "Did you see who just walked in?" When Meghan appeared in a silver gown that nearly matched Kris's, heads turned. Kim froze. Kylie raised an eyebrow. Even Khloe muttered something under her breath. Kris hadn't seen them yet, but Kim had, and she knew her mother wouldn't be pleased. Because this wasn't a friendly drop-in. This was a scene. And if there's one thing Kris Jenner doesn't allow, especially at her own birthday, it's someone else stealing the spotlight. The tension built in seconds. Meghan moved gracefully through the crowd, smiling as if she belonged there. Harry trailed behind, quieter, scanning faces that clearly didn't welcome him. The awkwardness was palpable. Guests didn't know whether to greet them or avoid them. Meghan didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't care. She posed with a drink in hand, adjusting her posture toward every camera lens in the room. But here's where it gets truly bizarre. According to several eyewitnesses, Kris's personal assistant had already warned her about this possibility days earlier. A mysterious text message, allegedly from a source close to Meghan, read, "They might show up. You've been warned." At first, Kris brushed it off. Hollywood rumors circulate faster than champagne at her parties. But seeing them now, standing in her home, made her blood run cold. Why this night? Why now? Was it revenge? A PR stunt? Or a desperate move to force a reconciliation with the Kardashian circle after months of tension? Because make no mistake, this wasn't the first time Kris and Meghan had clashed behind the scenes. Months earlier, Meghan had allegedly approached Kris about helping her rebrand her lifestyle image after the Netflix fallout. She wanted guidance, access, and connections. Kris listened, but she also saw through it. As one insider put it, Kris doesn't build empires for people who think they're above the rules. Still, Meghan's persistence had been relentless. She attended events, sent gifts, even tried to charm Kim through charity collaborations. But the Kardashians are experts at spotting ambition wrapped in flattery. The relationship soured quickly and privately. Until tonight. Now here she was, gliding across Kris's ballroom as though nothing had ever gone wrong. Smiling for photos. Laughing loudly. Making sure every eye in the room was on her. And Kris was seething. She motioned to her head of security, a man who had worked for her since her early reality show days. His face turned serious. He asked the simplest question, "Do you want them out?" Kris hesitated. Because despite everything, she knew what removing them publicly would mean: headlines, social backlash, and chaos. But she also knew that letting them stay meant losing control of her night. As she deliberated, something happened that pushed her over the edge. Meghan approached Kim. Cameras captured their conversation from a distance, but insiders say Meghan leaned in and whispered something that made Kim's expression shift instantly, from polite surprise to tight-lipped discomfort. Seconds later, Kim turned away without saying a word. That's when Kris decided she'd had enough. She took a slow sip of champagne, placed the glass down, and muttered to her PR manager, "Get me my phone." You could almost hear the air change. Because Kris Jenner doesn't make impulsive moves. Every decision is calculated. Every call is strategic. But this wasn't about strategy anymore. It was personal. Imagine that moment. Her hand gripping her phone, scrolling to her contacts. Her polished nails reflecting the chandelier light. She dialed a number she never thought she'd have to use for something like this. Her security team gathered quietly. The guests, still unaware of what was about to unfold, kept mingling, laughing, posing for selfies. But Kris was already 3 steps ahead. When the operator answered, she didn't mince words. Her voice was calm, controlled, but chilling. "This is Kris Jenner. I need police assistance at my residence. There are 2 individuals here who were not invited and refused to leave." The operator confirmed details. Kris's eyes stayed locked on Meghan from across the room. Meghan laughed, unaware. Harry looked uneasy, sensing something shifting in the air. Within minutes, squad cars were quietly rolling up the long driveway. Outside, paparazzi noticed the flashing lights first. Their lenses swung toward the gate, capturing the early moments of what would soon become an internet-breaking story. Inside, Kris kept her composure. She adjusted her diamond bracelet, leaned into Kim, and whispered, "It's handled." But it wasn't. Not yet. Because no one expected what happened next. Just as officers approached the door, Harry stepped forward, blocking them. Meghan turned, her face changing from charm to fury. And that's when the night truly began to unravel. The music stopped again. Guests backed away, whispering. And Kris, cool, composed, unmoving, watched it all unfold like a producer watching a scene she never scripted. What she didn't realize was that this confrontation would spark days of headlines, internal Kardashian feuds, and an international debate about who really runs Hollywood. The woman who built an empire from reality TV, or the Duchess who thought she could rewrite her own royal one. And the truth? The real chaos hadn't even begun. Because the moment the police stepped inside that mansion, everything changed. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What makes a party unforgettable? The laughter? The lights? The guest list that reads like a billionaire's contact book? Or is it the chaos that erupts when someone crosses a line no one dared to before? Because that night, Kris Jenner's 70th birthday, was supposed to be a celebration of triumph, not turmoil. It was meant to be her victory lap, her proof that after decades of scandals, reinventions, and empire building, she still ruled the Hollywood kingdom. But fate had a funny way of reminding even the most powerful that control is an illusion. The scene was breathtaking. Imagine the most glamorous event you've ever seen and multiply it by 10. Golden drapes cascading from ceilings, crystal chandeliers glittering like captured stars, and a champagne fountain that never seemed to run dry. Every inch of Kris's Beverly Hills mansion had been transformed into a palace of decadence. The backyard, her pride and joy, was lined with glowing white roses, each individually lit to shimmer like liquid fire. Guests whispered about how much it must have cost. Some said $2 million, others claimed double. But Kris didn't care. This night wasn't about money. It was about legacy. Her legacy. The matriarch of the most famous family in America had turned 70, and she wanted the world to know that power, beauty, and relevance were still firmly in her hands. Oprah arrived first, glowing in a sequin gown. Jeff Bezos followed with Lauren Sanchez on his arm. Elton John was seated at a piano near the marble staircase, gently testing the keys for a surprise performance. Kim floated in wearing a shimmering silver dress designed specifically to complement the decor, a subtle nod to her mother's theme. Cameras flashed. Laughter filled the room. It was, in every way, the perfect night. Until the Rolls-Royce arrived. Outside, the hum of luxury engines echoed down the driveway as the security gate buzzed open. A guard leaned forward, squinting at his tablet. 2 names weren't there. He scrolled again. Nothing. He radioed inside, voice tight. "We have unexpected arrivals. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle." The event coordinator froze. "They're not on the list," she said sharply. "I know," the guard replied. "But they're insisting they were invited personally." Inside the car, Meghan smiled with the confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no. Harry, less sure, stared ahead. His jaw clenched, his hand tapping his knee. "Let's just go home," he murmured under his breath. Meghan tilted her head toward him, eyes narrowing. "No, darling. We belong here." And with that, the gates opened. The guard, caught between obedience and panic, waved them through. The car rolled slowly up the long driveway, headlights washing over the mansion's columns. Paparazzi outside caught the moment instantly. Clicks filled the air like rainfall. The flashes painted the night white. And somewhere in that storm of light, a headline was born. Inside, the party was in full swing. Guests mingled under strings of gold lanterns, laughter spilling into every corner. Kim was chatting with Oprah about her next skincare launch. Kylie was posing for photos near the dessert bar. Khloe, drink in hand, was filming snippets for her Instagram story. Then, one of the security guards leaned down and whispered into Kris Jenner's ear. "Ma'am, Harry and Meghan just arrived." For a split second, Kris didn't react. Her smile remained frozen in place. Her perfectly composed mask didn't crack. She turned slightly, eyes narrowing like a hawk spotting prey. "I'm sorry, what?" The guard repeated the words. Kris's hand tightened around her champagne flute. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. Kim noticed immediately. "What's wrong, Mom?" "They're here," Kris said flatly. Kim blinked. "Who?" Kris didn't answer. She just motioned toward the entrance. And that's when the murmurs began. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. All eyes moved toward the grand doorway as Meghan stepped into the light. She looked radiant, too radiant. Her gown shimmered under the chandeliers, almost identical in tone to Kris's own. It wasn't just an outfit. It was a statement. Harry followed a few paces behind, trying to appear relaxed but clearly uncomfortable. He scanned the crowd as if searching for a friendly face. There were none. For a brief moment, silence swallowed the room. The kind of silence that hums with disbelief. Then came the first camera flash. One click, then another. Suddenly, everyone was taking photos. Kris's expression hardened. Now, to understand why this was such a big deal, you have to know the history behind it. Meghan and Kris had once been on speaking terms, barely. Back when Meghan's podcast was still running and Archewell had momentum, She had reportedly reached out to Kris for advice about branding. Kris was polite but distant. She respected ambition, but she could smell opportunism a mile away. Still, Meghan didn't take the hint. She kept pushing. Months later, when rumors surfaced that Meghan wanted to create her own reality-based docuseries to redefine the royal image, Kris was the first person approached for production advice. Her answer? A polite but firm no. It's not our brand. Translation, you're not a Kardashian. That rejection had stung. And tonight, Meghan seemed determined to rewrite that narrative. As she moved through the crowd, smiling and greeting guests she barely knew, whispers began to rise like wildfire. Did Kris invite her? I thought they weren't speaking. Is this a PR stunt? Even Kim looked uneasy. Her relationship with Meghan had always been complicated, friendly in public, cold in private. Meghan once told Vogue that she admired Kim's business savvy but wouldn't trade authenticity for exposure. Kim never forgot that line. Now here Meghan was, basking in exposure she hadn't been granted. And Kris was about to make sure everyone knew it. But first, she waited. She wanted to see how far Meghan would go. Meghan approached Oprah with a dazzling smile. Oprah, it's been forever. Oprah nodded, polite but surprised. Meghan, Harry, didn't know you'd be here. Oh, Kris insisted, Meghan said smoothly. Across the room, Kris heard it. The lie burned through her composure like acid. Harry, meanwhile, was visibly struggling. He stayed close to the wall, sipping his drink, clearly realizing they were out of place. He whispered to Meghan at one point, "We should say hello and leave." But Meghan was already in deep. She laughed loudly, waved at cameras, and started posing with anyone who would stand next to her. Guests exchanged awkward looks. No one dared confront her, not yet. After all, it was Kris's house, Kris's rules. But the tension was building. Inside the control room. Yes, Kris's events had a control room for lighting and media cues. Her staff watched the footage unfold through the security monitors. One assistant whispered, "She's everywhere. She's making rounds." Another asked, "Should we intervene?" The supervisor shook his head. Not until Kris says so. But when Meghan reached the main dance floor and tried to start a toast, the unspoken rule shattered. "Everyone, can we raise a glass to the woman of the hour?" she called out, clinking her champagne flute. Kris Jenner, the icon who proves that family, love, and reinvention are eternal. Guests froze. Some half-heartedly lifted their glasses, unsure what was happening. Even Kris was momentarily stunned. It was audacious. It was performative. It was classic Meghan. And yet, the irony was cutting. Because the woman Meghan was toasting wanted her out. Kim stepped in, placing a gentle hand on Meghan's arm. "Hey, maybe we should let Mom do her speech first," she said lightly, trying to defuse the moment. Meghan smiled thinly. "Of course, darling. I was just trying to celebrate her properly." Kris took the microphone from her PR coordinator, her voice calm but edged like glass. "Thank you, Meghan. That was unexpected." The room chuckled nervously. Kris's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Truly, I feel so blessed to celebrate with the people who've been part of my journey. Each and every one of you." The subtext hit like a punch. Meghan's smile faltered. She stepped back, folding her arms. Harry leaned in. "I told you." But Kris wasn't finished. She knew better than to explode publicly. Instead, she let the night move on, pretending all was well. She laughed, posed for photos, and mingled with Oprah and Elton John as though nothing were wrong. But inside, her patience was evaporating. When Meghan tried to approach the dessert table, right beside Kris, security subtly shifted closer. One of the guards murmured into his earpiece, "Ma'am, she's now following the family." Kris nodded once. "Stay close." Minutes later, Meghan cornered Kim again, her voice low but urgent. Witnesses caught snippets, something about a business opportunity and rebranding synergy. Kim's expression darkened. She excused herself quickly, and that's when Meghan made her final mistake. She turned to Kylie, laughing, and said, "You know, you and I have more in common than people think. We both know how to build empires from scratch." Kylie blinked. "I was born into mine," she replied deadpan. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Kris saw the entire exchange. She didn't say a word. She just picked up her phone, looked at her head of security, and said softly, "It's time." The guard nodded. Within minutes, Two officers were walking discreetly toward the side entrance, guided by staff. Outside, paparazzi swarmed. Someone leaked that royalty had crashed the party. Cameras captured flashing blue lights in the distance. The story was already breaking online before the first officer even stepped inside. Kris stood near the grand staircase, expression unreadable. Her empire, her rules, her night. She wasn't about to let anyone hijack it. Harry noticed first the movement near the doorway. His brow furrowed. "Meghan," he whispered. "Something's happening." She brushed him off, still smiling for a camera. Then one of the officers, polite but firm, approached. "Excuse me, ma'am. Could we have a word?" The room fell silent. Meghan blinked, confused. "I'm sorry. Mrs. Jenner has requested that all uninvited guests exit the premises." Gasps. Meghan's face went pale, then red. Harry looked like he wanted to disappear. For a moment, time stopped. Cameras clicked. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" Meghan's voice cracked just slightly. "We were invited." Kris stepped forward at last. Her tone was smooth as silk, but her words carried the weight of steel. "You weren't." And that's when chaos erupted. Harry tried to reason with the officers. Meghan demanded to speak with Kris privately. Kim tried to mediate, whispering urgently to both sides. Guests pulled out phones, recording every second. It was a circus, and Kris was at the center, calm and cold. One reporter later described her expression as a queen defending her throne. But what no one realized then was that the footage from that moment, the officers entering, Meghan's protests, Kris's icy calm, would soon leak to the world. And when it did, it wouldn't just be a scandal. It would be a reckoning, because Hollywood had just witnessed something it had never seen before. The woman who built fame as an art form, drawing a line against those who tried to fake it. But this confrontation was only beginning. Because as Meghan refused to leave and Harry's temper began to flare, Kris would face a decision that would haunt her long after the guests went home. And the next move she made? It would shock even her own family. What drives someone to walk into a room they were never meant to enter? Ego? Desperation? Or the unshakable belief that the world still owes them a seat at the table? That question hung heavy in the air as Meghan Markle and Prince Harry crossed the threshold of Kris Jenner's 70th birthday party, flashing smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. The hum of conversation dimmed. Every camera phone in the room seemed to tilt their way. Guests exchanged looks that said everything: shock, curiosity, amusement. Nobody had expected them. And the irony? Meghan seemed to revel in that very disbelief. Her entrance was perfectly timed, just as Elton John hit the first soft notes of an unreleased melody, just as champagne trays passed through the crowd. The room was at its photographic peak, and there she was, bathed in gold light, every camera finding her automatically. Was it calculated? You tell me. Harry followed a step behind, trying to appear calm, though the tension in his jaw betrayed him. His eyes darted toward Kris, who stood across the room, her practiced smile freezing like glass. Kris Jenner was not easily shaken. But this? This was audacious even by Hollywood standards. Imagine the quiet panic rippling through her event staff. The whispers. The frantic messages between the PR team and security. Are they on the list? Who let them through? Should we tell Kris? But by the time anyone could act, it was too late. Meghan was already in the spotlight. She moved through the room with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before, pausing just long enough for photos, turning her chin to catch the perfect angle of light. She laughed a little too loudly, complimented strangers she barely knew, and made sure to linger near the celebrity clusters that would guarantee her visibility. It wasn't confidence. It was choreography. And yet, behind her smile, there was something brittle, something hungry. Harry knew it too. He leaned toward her once, muttering, "We shouldn't be here." She didn't look at him. "Trust me, it'll be fine." But it wasn't, because in the far corner of the ballroom, Kris Jenner had already summoned her event coordinator. "Who approved them?" she demanded, voice low and clipped. "No one, ma'am. They arrived at the gate claiming personal invitation." "Did you confirm?" "They insisted you invited them directly." Kris exhaled sharply through her nose. "I most certainly did not." She turned back to the crowd, every inch the composed hostess, but her mind was racing. She'd built her empire on controlling chaos. But tonight, the chaos had walked in wearing diamonds and a tiara of entitlement. And the worst part? Cameras were everywhere. Because if Kris Jenner was the queen of publicity, Meghan Markle was the Duchess of opportunism. She knew how this looked. The Duchess of Sussex mingling with America's first family of fame. A new alliance, a new headline, a new moment in the Hollywood power game. But what she hadn't considered was that Kris Jenner didn't share her spotlight. She owned it. From across the room, Kim Kardashian noticed the tension instantly. She exchanged a glance with her mother, one of those silent Kardashian signals honed from years of televised drama. "Do you want me to handle it?" she mouthed. Kris shook her head. Not yet. Because if there was one thing Kris had mastered, it was patience. Let your rival dig the hole first. Meanwhile, Meghan had found herself beside Oprah. It was a scene almost too surreal to believe. The woman who gave her the world's most infamous interview now face to face with the woman who felt betrayed by how that interview was used. "Oprah," Meghan exclaimed brightly, wrapping her arms around her. "It's been too long." Oprah smiled politely, though her eyes flickered with discomfort. "Indeed. This is quite a surprise. Oh, Kris insisted we come. You know how she is. Always the gracious host." Across the room, Kris's grip on her glass tightened. That was the first lie of the night, and it wouldn't be the last. Harry shifted uncomfortably beside Meghan, offering Oprah a brief nod. His posture screamed awkwardness. He wasn't a man used to being ignored, yet here, surrounded by Hollywood titans, he might as well have been invisible. The small talk was excruciating. Guests approached Meghan cautiously, unsure whether to treat her as royalty or tabloid spectacle. Some smiled. Some simply turned away. You could feel the disconnect. Because while Meghan had once represented elegance, she now carried a reputation, one built on controversy, lawsuits, and fractured relationships. And in this crowd, reputation was currency. At one point, Kris's close friend Kathy Hilton whispered to another guest, "This is like watching a bad crossover episode." The guest nearly spit out their champagne. But the tension wasn't just social, it was emotional. For Meghan, this night was about belonging, about proving she could still command the room, that she hadn't fallen from grace, merely switched thrones. For Kris, it was about respect, about boundaries, about control. And as both women smiled for the cameras, a quiet war was being waged behind their eyes. Harry finally tried to pull Meghan aside. "This is ridiculous. Let's just leave before it gets worse." She gave a small, fixed smile. "And let them think we were embarrassed?" "No, we'll leave when I'm ready." He sighed, defeated. He'd seen this side of her before, the stubborn defiance that had once been admirable, now exhausting. Meanwhile, outside, paparazzi had already picked up on the tension. The scene unfolding inside was being broadcast in real time on social media. Hashtags began trending within minutes. Hashtag Kris vs. Meghan, hashtag Royal Crashers, hashtag BirthdayGate. Inside the mansion, Kris's phone buzzed. Her assistant whispered, "It's everywhere already." Kris inhaled slowly. "Of course it is." She turned her gaze back to Meghan, who was now chatting animatedly with Kim as though nothing were wrong. Kim's polite smile was strained. The conversation looked civil from afar, but if you read Kim's lips, you could almost see the words, "You shouldn't have come." That was the breaking point. Kris's patience snapped. She set down her glass, straightened her posture, and said quietly, "Handle this." Within seconds, her security chief was moving. 2 guards approached the outer perimeter, ensuring no more media could get in. Another discreetly positioned himself behind Harry and Meghan, pretending to check lighting. But Kris wasn't done. She motioned to Kim, who approached cautiously. "Mom, are you sure?" Kim whispered. "Yes," Kris said firmly. "But do it quietly. We're not making a scene." Kim nodded, exhaled, and walked toward Meghan, her smile perfectly rehearsed. "Hey," she said softly. "Just a heads up, this event's really tight on the guest list tonight. Mom wasn't expecting any last-minute arrivals. Maybe we can find a quieter spot to chat." It was polite, controlled, but Meghan wasn't having it. "Kim, don't be silly. We're here to celebrate your mom. Why would she care?" Kim blinked. "Because she didn't invite you." That landed like a thunderclap. For a moment, Meghan's face froze. Her smile faltered, but only for a second. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'll clear it up with Kris myself." Kim shook her head. "I wouldn't." But Meghan was already walking toward Kris. And that's when everything unraveled. Every guest seemed to turn at once. The air thickened with tension. Meghan approached Kris with that poised confidence. the kind she'd perfected in front of royal cameras. "Kris," she began, voice smooth but tight. "I think there's been a mistake. We were told you wanted us here." Chris's eyes didn't blink. "By who?" There was silence, the kind that hums before a storm. Meghan hesitated. "A mutual contact." "Name?" Chris's voice was calm, surgical. Meghan didn't answer. Kris tilted her head, her expression soft but merciless. "Then it seems you've been misinformed." Harry stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. "Look, maybe we should just—" But Meghan interrupted. "We're not leaving. Not until this is cleared up." And that's when Chris's mask finally cracked. She leaned in, voice low enough only for Meghan to hear. "You've made a scene in my home. You've lied about my invitation. You're going to walk out now, or I'll make sure you're escorted out." The words hit like ice water. Meghan's eyes widened. "You wouldn't." Chris's smile was razor-thin. "Watch me." Harry looked around, realizing the eyes of Hollywood royalty were all on them. His face flushed crimson. "This is insane," he muttered. Meghan folded her arms. "We have as much right to be here as anyone." Kris straightened, turned to her head of security, and simply said, "Do it." The guards moved immediately. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The music stuttered. Cameras flashed like lightning. But before the officers could reach them, Harry did something no one expected. He stepped directly in front of Meghan, shielding her from the guards, his voice rising. "You think you can embarrass us like this? In front of the world?" Kris didn't flinch. "You embarrassed yourselves the moment you walked in." Silence. Pure, electric silence. And then, chaos. Someone shouted for cameras to stop filming. A waiter dropped a tray. Meghan's expression hardened into steel. And as Harry's anger boiled over, Chris's calm only deepened. She turned slightly to her assistant and said, "Call them now." Her assistant hesitated. "You mean?" "Yes, the police." Outside, flashing blue lights began to climb the driveway. Inside, Meghan's voice trembled with disbelief. "You called the police? On us?" Chris's answer was a whisper, but it carried across the entire room. "On anyone who doesn't respect boundaries." The officers entered seconds later, their badges glinting under chandelier light. Guests parted like the Red Sea. The music died completely. And just as one officer stepped forward to speak with Harry, Meghan turned to him, eyes blazing, and said something no one will ever forget. Something that turned a celebrity spat into an international spectacle. But what she said would make headlines for weeks. And it was only the beginning. "Do you know who I am?" The words slipped from Meghan's lips like a reflex. Half a statement, half a threat. The officer who stood before her froze mid-step, uncertain how to respond. Around them, 100 celebrity eyes were fixed on the unfolding standoff. Phones hovered low, pretending not to record, but everyone was recording. Kris Jenner didn't move. She just folded her arms and watched. The queen of image management didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence alone was power. "Ma'am," the officer said carefully, "we're not here to cause a scene. We just need to confirm the situation." Mrs. Jenner made a complaint about uninvited guests. Harry exhaled sharply, frustration bubbling. "This is ridiculous. We were invited. Ask Kim." She told Meghan to come. Kim, standing a few feet away, blinked in disbelief. "What? No, I didn't." Meghan turned, eyes narrowing. "You did, Kim. You said, you should come by if you're in town. That's an invitation." The crowd gasped quietly. Even Kim looked stunned at the audacity of the spin. Chris's jaw tightened. "That's not an invitation, Meghan. That's small talk." But Meghan wasn't backing down. She took a slow step forward, every inch the duchess she used to be. Her tone turned syrupy sweet. "Kris, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. You know how it is. Our teams sometimes cross wires. I spoke to Kim, I assumed." "Assumed wrong." Kris cut in coldly. There it was, the moment everyone in the room felt the temperature drop. Harry tried to step between them. "Look, maybe this is just a miscommunication. We'll head out if you'd rather." But Meghan shot him a look sharp enough to slice glass. "No, we're not leaving. Not like this." Kris arched an eyebrow. "Not like what?" "Not humiliated," Meghan hissed under her breath. The officer cleared his throat. "Maybe we can take this conversation outside." "No," Meghan said instantly. Her voice cracked, just slightly, betraying the tremor beneath her polished facade. "I'm not going anywhere until we clear this up." Then came the gambit. The one play Meghan thought could turn the tide. She straightened her posture, fixed Kris with that public relations smile she'd perfected and said, "You can't do this to us." Kim begged us to come. The room went dead quiet. Every Kardashian head snapped toward her. Kim's mouth fell open. "I what?" "She did," Meghan insisted, her tone turning performative, almost theatrical. She said, "Mom would love to see you. It'll be iconic." "You even said that, didn't you, Kim?" For a moment, Kim just stood there, frozen between shock and rage. Kris's voice was ice. "Careful, Meghan." But Meghan didn't stop. "You can't just throw us out after inviting us in. Well, it's cruel. We've been nothing but respectful." The irony of that sentence was almost too much. Respectful? She'd hijacked the party, lied about the invite, and now tried to gaslight the hosts on camera. Kim finally snapped. "That's not true. I never said that. Don't twist my words." "Oh, come on," Meghan replied, her tone dripping with practiced charm. "You were just being polite. Don't be embarrassed." Harry tugged on her arm. "Let's go." She shook him off. "Not yet." From the sidelines, Khloe whispered to Kylie, "This is insane. She's gaslighting Kim Kardashian at Kris Jenner's house. That's Olympic-level delusion." Kylie nodded wide-eyed. "It's like watching a reality show in real time." The officer, caught between celebrity politics and potential headlines, looked utterly lost. "Mrs. Jenner, do you want to proceed with removal?" Kris inhaled slowly, her eyes never leaving Meghan. She could have ended it there. One nod, and the guards would have escorted them out quietly. But Kris Jenner wasn't just a host. She was a strategist. And she saw an opportunity. "Not yet," she said calmly. "Let's hear what they have to say." Because in Kris's world, reputation wasn't defended, it was destroyed strategically. "Meghan," she said, voice calm but cutting. "If Kim begged you to come, prove it. Show me the text." The crowd shifted uneasily. It was a trap, and everyone knew it. Meghan blinked. "What? The text?" Kris repeated. "If Kim invited you, show us. You're a communicator, right? You must have receipts." Meghan's fingers tightened around her clutch. Her lips pressed together. Harry stepped in again. "This is ridiculous." "No, Harry," Kris said, her tone slicing through his protest. "This is my home. You came in uninvited, lied about it, and now you're accusing my daughter of something she didn't do. So either prove it, or leave." The silence was suffocating. Every camera phone, every whisper, every breath seemed suspended in midair. Meghan's face hardened. "We're not doing this." "Then you're leaving," Kris replied smoothly. It was over, or so everyone thought. But then Meghan tried a different tactic. She laughed softly, shaking her head as though she found the whole thing amusing. "You know, I see what this is. You're trying to embarrass us. You think if we're pushed out, people will side with you. But you're forgetting something, Kris." Kris tilted her head. "And what's that?" "I'm the one people talk about." That line hit like a live wire. It was arrogance and insecurity fused together. The very essence of Meghan Markle distilled into one defiant statement. And for the first time that night, Kris actually laughed. A cold, knowing laugh. "Oh, sweetie," she said softly. "People talk about you because you make it easy." The room exhaled as if it had been holding its breath. Harry's shoulders sagged. He looked at Meghan, pleading silently for her to stop. But she couldn't. She was too far in. "This isn't fair," Meghan said, voice trembling now. "You all think you're better because you were born into fame. I worked for mine. I earned it." Kris stepped closer. "So did I." That line silenced her. And for a split second, Meghan's eyes flickered. Shock, anger, maybe even recognition. Because Kris was right. She wasn't born into privilege either. She built her empire from the ground up, out of scandal, ambition, and sheer grit. But that was the difference. Kris built power. Meghan borrowed it. And the room could feel that truth sinking in. Then, out of nowhere, Harry's voice broke the tension. "Enough. We're leaving." He turned to go, but Meghan didn't move. Her eyes darted between Kris, Kim, and the crowd, the humiliation settling in like a storm cloud. And just when it seemed she'd finally surrender, she muttered something under her breath. "I should have gone to Kylie's party instead." Kylie's jaw dropped. "Excuse me." Now it was total chaos. Guests started whispering again. Cameras rose higher. Harry looked mortified. "Meghan," he warned. But Meghan wasn't done. "At least she's genuine. You people pretend to support women until they outshine you." Kris's face didn't move, but her eyes turned to ice. "Outshine me? You're standing in my house," crashing my party, surrounded by my family, talking about me like I'm a headline. You don't outshine me. Meghan, you orbit me. The audience gasped. Harry muttered something to the officer about leaving voluntarily, but Meghan's pride wouldn't allow it. And then, from the corner of the room, another voice cut through the chaos. Calm, familiar, commanding. Enough. It was Kim. She walked forward, heels clicking like a metronome of authority. Mom, let's end this. They've made their point. Let them go. Meghan smiled faintly, misreading the gesture. Thank you, Kim. But Kim wasn't defending her. You've embarrassed yourself enough tonight, she said quietly. And if you cared about your husband even half as much as you care about your image, you'd stop right now. Meghan's expression shattered. Harry looked down, defeated. Come on. There's a strange calm that comes over Kris Jenner when she's furious. Not the kind of fury that yells or flails. No, hers is quieter, more surgical. It's the kind of rage that strategizes, that weighs how every reaction will echo across headlines, and decides which move will do the most damage without her ever having to raise her voice. That was the energy in the room after Meghan and Harry were escorted outside. Kris stood perfectly still, a champagne flute dangling loosely between her fingers, her jaw locked in a smile that was no longer for the cameras, but for control. Her family circled her like planets around a sun they weren't sure was stable anymore. Kim spoke first. Mom, it's over. They're gone. Just breathe. Kris didn't. Her chest barely moved. She stared past her daughter, her eyes unfocused, as if calculating a dozen PR scenarios all at once. Chloe muttered, that was unreal. Who even does that? Kylie shook her head. She looked like she was auditioning for something. Who crashes a 70-year-old's party in full glam? Kris finally exhaled, placing her glass on a nearby tray. Her voice, when it came, was measured. She wanted attention. She got it, but not the kind she expected. Then, quieter, almost to herself. No one humiliates me in my own home. The phrase landed heavily. Kim frowned. Mom, don't. Kris cut her off with a glance. Don't what? Handle it? You think I built this family by letting people walk all over us? No one spoke. They'd all seen this version of her before. The crisis manager, the chess player who could turn a disaster into a global headline within hours. She was already thinking 5 moves ahead. But something about this incident had cut deeper. This wasn't just a PR fire to put out. It was personal. Outside, the chaos hadn't calmed. Paparazzi lenses glinted through the hedges as Meghan and Harry's car idled at the gate, headlights slicing through the darkness. Reporters shouted questions, flashes strobed like lightning. The police were still speaking to security. Every moment was being captured, every whisper ready to explode online. Inside, Kris turned to her publicist, who had been quietly taking notes near the wall. Damage control plan, she ordered. Already drafting it, the woman said briskly. We'll release a statement emphasizing gratitude, love, and privacy. No mention of the incident. Kris nodded. Good. And call TMZ. I want the footage. All of it. Before anyone else gets it. The publicist hesitated. They're going to want a statement. They'll get one, Kris said, when I decide what it is. She moved through the room with a kind of eerie calm, greeting guests who were pretending not to gossip, offering polite smiles as though the entire confrontation hadn't just happened. But every step was deliberate. She knew cameras were still rolling. She knew leaks would happen. What she needed now was to own the narrative before Meghan did. Because if Kris had learned anything from decades in the spotlight, it was that silence was a weapon, but only if you were the one controlling it. Outside, a different kind of silence filled the car where Meghan and Harry sat. The Rolls-Royce was motionless, surrounded by flashing lights and murmuring officers. Meghan stared straight ahead, her expression blank but her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Harry broke the silence first. You happy now? She turned to him, eyes glinting. Don't you dare put this on me. Who else am I supposed to put it on? He snapped. You lied to them, Meghan. You said we were invited. You dragged me into this. I didn't lie, she insisted, her voice rising. Kim said we should come. Harry shook his head in disbelief. You twisted her words. Again, Meghan's jaw clenched. I was trying to fix things. To reconnect. You think it's easy for me? You think I like being on the outside? He sighed, rubbing his temples. This isn't how you fix it. She looked out the window, blinking rapidly as the flashes intensified. It doesn't matter. They'll spin it. They always do. And she was right. Back inside, Kris was already doing just that. Her PR manager had pulled up early social media clips of the confrontation, blurry, incomplete, but viral nonetheless. These are everywhere already. Hashtag Kris versus Meghan. Hashtag Royal Crash. Hashtag Boundaries Queen. It's blowing up. Kris leaned over the screen, watching herself. Calm, composed, unflinching. As the officers escorted Meghan away. "Leave it," she said. The manager blinked. "Excuse me. Don't take it down. Let it trend." Kim frowned. "Mom, are you sure? It makes it look like we called the cops." "We did call the cops," Kris said dryly. "And I'm not apologizing for it." Chloe's eyebrows shot up. "You want to own it?" Kris nodded slowly. "That's the difference between me and them. They hide. We own." The words rolled through the room with the confidence of someone who'd spent her entire life turning disasters into empires. But deep down, something else stirred, a sense of betrayal she couldn't quite shake. Kris had been through scandal before, but never one that invaded her personal space like this. Meghan's intrusion wasn't just about fame or attention. It was about violating boundaries, about disrespecting the unwritten rule of Hollywood power. Never embarrass the matriarch. And Meghan had done exactly that. Kris's assistant approached hesitantly. "Should we cancel tomorrow's interview with Variety? They'll ask about this." Kris shook her head. "No, I'll answer it myself." Kim glanced at her, uneasy. "What are you planning?" Kris smiled faintly. "I'm going to tell the truth." But Kris Jenner's version of truth was never literal. It was tactical. She would craft the narrative so subtly, so precisely, that by the time the world finished watching, they'd forget Meghan ever existed. She looked out across her ballroom, now half empty, the music soft and subdued. Her eyes caught the reflection of herself in the mirrored wall, immaculate, poised, and utterly unbreakable. "Let's start cleaning up," she said softly. "This party's over." But it wasn't, because even as the last guests filed out and the staff began clearing glasses, one of Kris's security team members approached her with a phone in hand. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "you might want to see this." On the screen was a clip, leaked already to Twitter. The body cam footage from one of the responding officers. In it, Meghan could be heard shouting just before exiting the mansion. Her voice was sharp, trembling with anger. "You'll regret this, Kris." Kris stared at the video. A slow, almost amused smile curved her lips. "Regret?" she murmured. "Not likely." Then she handed the phone back. "Keep monitoring. And tell the PR team to be ready in the morning. This isn't going away." As the room emptied, Kris walked toward the grand staircase, heels clicking against marble. She paused halfway up and glanced back at the faint glitter of the night's chaos. The overturned glasses, the dying candles, the last echo of what was supposed to be her perfect evening. Her voice was quiet, but her words carried. "They want a war? I'll give them one." Upstairs, she closed her bedroom door behind her and sank into her armchair, the one where she made all her biggest decisions. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification. This time, it was from an unknown number. It read, "You did the right thing. She never learns." Kris frowned. "Who is this?" she whispered, typing back. No reply. She read the message again, uneasy now. Who would text her something like that? A friend? A rival? Someone feeding the story from the inside. For the first time that night, the mask slipped, just slightly. Kris felt a prickle of something unfamiliar, uncertainty. Because if Meghan had been set up, then who else had been pulling strings behind the scenes? And as Kris stared at her phone, one thought repeated itself over and over. If this wasn't just coincidence, if someone had wanted Meghan humiliated, then maybe the real drama hadn't even started yet. Because in Hollywood, no feud stays private for long. And when the next morning came, with the tabloids screaming "Kris calls cops on Duchess," it wouldn't just be a story. It would be a war between two women who refused to be outshone. But what neither of them knew was that another figure, one far more dangerous, far more powerful, was already watching from the shadows. And soon, they'd both realize the humiliation was only the beginning. Because by the end of the week, the world wouldn't just be talking about Kris versus Meghan. They'd be asking, who leaked the text? Have you ever wondered what it feels like to make a phone call that could change the course of an evening, or an entire legacy? To hold in your hands the power to decide whether the world sees you as calm, controlled, or utterly unhinged. That's exactly the moment Kris Jenner faced, standing in the middle of her glittering ballroom, watching Meghan and Harry weave chaos into her meticulously planned 70th birthday. It was one of those rare times where instinct and strategy collided. Kris had tolerated, observed, and let the situation unfold for nearly an hour, measuring every word, every smirk, every forced smile. She'd watched Meghan pose for photos, turn to Kim, whisper under the pretense of charm, and challenge every ounce of control Kris had built. She had watched Harry shuffle along, exasperated, caught between his wife's defiance and the palpable tension growing with every passing second. And then it clicked. The way Meghan maneuvered through her home, asserting a presence that wasn't hers, ignoring polite hints, claiming fake invitations. This wasn't just arrogance. It was an attempt to undermine Kris, to publicly humiliate her. And Kris Jenner doesn't take humiliation lightly. Her hand moved to her phone. Her fingers hovered over the contact she never thought she'd need, the local police precinct. In Hollywood, a call like this is almost unheard of. Celebrities handle their problems privately, through managers, lawyers, or carefully crafted social media narratives. But Kris had reached her limit. And the call she was about to make wasn't just about enforcing boundaries. It was a statement. Nobody, not even royalty in disguise, could dictate terms in her home. Her assistant hovered nearby, clearly anxious. "Ma'am, are you sure?" Kris's eyes didn't waver. "I'm sure," she said softly. "It's not just a party anymore. It's a statement of control. Make the call." The operator answered almost immediately. Kris's voice was calm, measured, each word deliberate. "This is Kris Jenner. I need police assistance at my residence. There are 2 individuals here who are uninvited and refuse to leave." Seconds of silence followed, punctuated only by the distant hum of music and the clinking of champagne glasses. Then the operator responded, professional but slightly startled. "Can you confirm their identities?" "Yes," Kris replied, her tone clipped, precise. "Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Please come immediately." In the room, the staff exchanged wide-eyed glances. Even Kim, standing just a few feet away, had to bite her lip to stop herself from reacting. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation, every heartbeat amplifying the tension. Meghan was still smiling, laughing softly at a joke she'd just told to Elton John, completely unaware of the decision being made in the next room. Harry, meanwhile, had begun pacing, sensing that the evening's trajectory was shifting in ways he couldn't control. The guests had no idea what was happening. To them, it was an odd mix of performance and reality. But for Kris, this was the culmination of years of precision, calculation, and unrelenting self-preservation. And then, within moments, blue lights appeared through the expansive gates of the Jenner estate. The flashing lights reflected off the marble floors and mirrored walls, sending fractured beams across the party. Cameras outside were already capturing the moment, while inside, guests instinctively turned to see the cause of the sudden stir. The officers approached politely, their presence professional but firm. One stepped forward, adjusting his badge. "Ma'am," he began carefully, "we understand there's an issue inside the residence." Meghan's smile faltered slightly. "Issue? This is a birthday party." Harry's jaw tightened. "What's happening now?" The officer cleared his throat. "We've been asked to assist with ensuring that uninvited guests exit the premises." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The music faltered and then stopped entirely, replaced by murmurs, whispers, and the subtle shuffle of unease. The staff moved quickly, guiding officers discreetly toward Meghan and Harry without escalating tension. Kris stood at the center of the room, still poised, still composed. To anyone watching, it might have looked like effortless elegance. But inside, every cell in her body was alert, calculating, ready for the next move. This was more than a confrontation. This was a lesson in control, in boundaries, in the silent assertion of power. Meghan, sensing something amiss, turned toward Kris with the poise of someone used to command. "You've called the police?" Kris's gaze met hers directly, unwavering. "I have," she said softly. "Because boundaries are non-negotiable. Not in my home. Not on my birthday. Not ever." The words reverberated across the room. Harry stepped forward, frustration boiling over. "This is insane. We were invited. You can't just—" "You were not invited," Kris said, voice rising fractionally but remaining razor-sharp. You do not have the right to hijack this event or humiliate me in my own home. And now, law enforcement will ensure you leave quietly." Meghan's eyes narrowed, a mix of indignation and disbelief. She glanced at Harry, silently urging him to intervene. But he knew better. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a power play. And Kris Jenner doesn't play loosely. Outside, the paparazzi were already posting snippets online, live updates cascading across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The hashtags appeared instantly. Hashtag Kris calls cops. Hashtag Royal Crashers. Hashtag BirthdayGate. Within minutes, what was intended to be a private family celebration had become an international spectacle. Guests tried to navigate the tension carefully, some sneaking photos, others whispering among themselves. Conversations faltered as the reality of the situation settled. This wasn't just a party anymore. It was history in motion, a real-time demonstration of Hollywood meets royalty. And the consequences of stepping on the wrong toes. Meghan, now realizing the gravity, leaned toward Harry. This is public. They're recording everything." Harry's hands tightened into fists. "I know. Just stay calm. Don't give them any reason to escalate further." Kris, meanwhile, had already moved. She positioned herself near the staircase, her posture perfect, her composure unshakable. Every step calculated, every movement deliberate. Guests glanced at her, some impressed, others intimidated. The officers approached Meghan and Harry cautiously. "Ma'am, sir," one began, "we need you to step outside with us." Meghan's voice rose. "I'm not leaving. This is absurd." Harry placed a hand on her arm, trying to diffuse the situation. "Please, Meghan, let's handle this." Kris's gaze never wavered. She watched as her home, her perfectly curated celebration, became the stage for an unprecedented standoff. The cameras outside would tell one story: the officers, the flashbulbs, the defiance of royalty. But Kris knew the real story would be her narrative. The story of control, authority, and the lesson that in her house, nobody outranks the matriarch. And then, as Meghan hesitated, the room held its breath. Every guest frozen, every photographer ready, every family member bracing for the next move. Because in Kris Jenner's world, every action is a statement, and every statement has consequences. The next moments would define the night, the headlines, and the legacy of everyone involved. But just as the officers were about to make contact, Meghan's phone buzzed with a notification that made her freeze. She glanced down. It was not a text from Harry, not from a friend, not from her team. It was a message from an unknown number. It read, "They're not bluffing. Leave now." Meghan looked up at Harry, eyes wide with alarm. "Who is this?" Harry shook his head, equally stunned. "I don't know. But this isn't over." And in that moment, the entire ballroom, still glittering with gold and light, felt a chill. Because in Hollywood, in royalty, in the intersection of fame and power, nothing is ever simple. And Kris Jenner? She was just getting started. Have you ever seen chaos turn into spectacle in real time? Because that's exactly what happened the moment Meghan and Harry were confronted at Kris Jenner's 70th birthday party. 1 minute, it was a private, glittering celebration of wealth, fame, and family. The next, it was an international headline. A perfect storm of social media frenzy, paparazzi hysteria, and celebrity gossip ready to explode. The flash of cameras outside the mansion had already begun to leak into Twitter feeds, Instagram stories, and live news streams. Within seconds, snippets of Meghan arguing, Harry pacing, and Kris standing perfectly poised circulated across multiple platforms. The hashtags spread faster than wildfire. Hashtag Kris calls cops. Hashtag Royal Crashers. Hashtag BirthdayGate. Hashtag Hollywood meets royalty. Inside, guests were frozen in disbelief. Some whispered, some chuckled nervously, and a few dared to record video on their phones, knowing these moments would be worth millions in views, retweets, and likes. Every detail, Meghan's silver gown, Harry's red-faced frustration, Kris's icy composure, became fodder for online commentary almost immediately. Even the celebrities attending weren't immune. Oprah, once Meghan's confidant in the infamous royal interview, kept her expression polite but tight-lipped. Jeff Bezos raised an eyebrow, clearly calculating the potential virality of what was unfolding before him. And Elton John, seated near the grand piano, paused mid-note, his fingers frozen on the keys as he watched the tension ripple across the room. Social media algorithms were having a field day. Within moments, clips of the confrontation were trending globally. Viewers across the world were watching live streams of the police approaching the couple, hearing Meghan's defiant whispers, Harry's exasperated mutters, and Kris's razor-sharp commands. The world couldn't look away. It was dramatic, theatrical, and completely unpredictable. And as the digital chaos grew, so did the pressure inside the mansion. Kris's team scrambled, coordinating with PR managers, social media strategists, and legal advisors. "We need to spin this immediately," one manager whispered. "They'll try to frame us as bullies." Kris, ever composed, shook her head. "Let it trend," she said calmly. "We don't chase the story. We control it. And no one has ever controlled the narrative like we have." Meanwhile, outside, the paparazzi had formed a perimeter around the driveway. Flashbulbs exploded in bursts, catching every subtle movement. Fans and onlookers gathered on the street, phones lifted, streaming the spectacle as it unfolded. News outlets picked up the live streams and began reporting. Headlines erupted in real time. Royal couple crashes Kris Jenner's birthday. Police called on Meghan and Harry at star-studded party. Hollywood matriarch versus ex-royal couple. Who wins?